In this video, I'm going to talk about the case of Johnson v. McIntosh. So if you go to law school, you'll be required to take a course in property law, and typically the first case that you'll read is the case of Johnson v. McIntosh. All right, and although the case is written in the early 1800s, it goes into depth about history. It's relatively easy to understand. So the ruling essentially states that American Indians cannot sell the land that they occupy. And that ruling is based on the discovery doctrine. So the facts of the case are also pretty straightforward and pretty simple. An Indian tribe in Illinois sold land to a man named Thomas Johnson. The same land was later sold to William McIntosh by the U.S. government. Okay? McIntosh received a grant for the land. Johnson's heirs filed a lawsuit in Illinois District Court seeking to have McIntosh ejected from the land, essentially a court order requiring McIntosh to pack up and leave. The district court rejected Johnson's case, ruling that the Indian tribe had no authority to sell the land at issue. So Johnson, not liking this opinion, appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the court affirms the lower court's decision, meaning they agree with the lower court, and there is a unanimous decision, and the opinion is written by Chief Justice John Marshall. So like I said, the Supreme Court agrees with the lower court. So the ruling ultimately says the United States has a power to grant the soil, in other words the land, while yet in possession of the natives, subject only to the Indian right of occupancy. Okay, so the Indians have a right to be on the land, to occupy the land. However, they have no right to sell the land. And like I said, the ruling is based on the discovery doctrine. And Marshall sums up the discovery doctrine saying this principle was that discovery gave title to the government by whose subjects or by whose authority it was made against all other European governments. And then, like I said, he goes into a lengthy history of charters and conquest made by, primarily he focuses on Great Britain, but he references France and Spain and all of the nations who were involved in colonizing North America. So the rights acquired by Britain through discovery were later assumed by America in the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War. So whatever land Britain had claimed through discovery was assumed or taken on by America through its independence. Marshall states that it's not the court's role to consider matters of original justice or natural law as they relate to the discovery doctrine. In other words, there's not going to be any judicial activism. He's not going to get into what's right and what's wrong. He's simply saying all nations observe this doctrine, and therefore the court is not going to do anything contrary to it. Marshall writes, conquest gives a title which the courts of the conqueror cannot deny, whatever the private and speculative opinions of individuals may be, respecting the original justice of the claim which has been successfully asserted. Now, Marshall also writes that conquered people should not be wantonly oppressed, and if possible, they should be allowed to retain their property rights. So ideally, the new and old members of the society mingle with each other, the distinction between them is gradually lost, and they make one people. Where this incorporation is practicable, humanity demands and a wise policy requires that the rights of the conquered to property should remain unimpaired. So ideally, the conquerors and the conquered will live harmoniously, become one people, and the conquered people will not lose any of their rights. Marshall claims, however, that it was impossible to mix with the natives, who were as brave and as high-spirited as they were fierce. So he writes, the tribes of Indians inhabiting this country were fierce savages, whose occupation was war, and whose subsistence was drawn chiefly from the forest. To leave them in possession of their country was to leave the country a wilderness. By not enforcing their claims by the sword, European settlers were exposing themselves and their families to the perpetual hazard of being massacred. So the main points are these. First of all, Indian tribes cannot sell their land. The U.S. government has the original authority to sell discovered lands subject to Indians' occupancy of that land. Number 3, this is all based on the discovery doctrine. And lastly, you need to know that Britain's discovery rights were assumed by America through the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War.